Hi friends, a warm welcome to the set of 50 software testing interview questions and answers, which should be a huge time saver and highly effective. If you have not watched the previous software testing tutorial video, watch it now, link is given in the description box. In the interview, our answers should be precise, exact and specific. These 50 questions have been created after a thorough analysis, so you don't need to spend time in reading or watching hundreds of questions. So let's get started now without further delay. So friends, the most basic question which every tester should know in a proper way is, what is the software testing? Software testing is the process of evaluating and verifying that a software product or application does what it is supposed to do. ISTQB defines testing as a process that determines software products satisfy specified requirements. Also, testing demonstrates that software is fit for purpose. And it detects defects. So friends, what are quality assurance and quality control? This question is also a very popular, fundamental and common question. Quality assurance or QA involves in process-oriented activities, whereas quality control or QC involves in product-oriented activities. QA ensures the prevention of defects while developing the software, whereas QC executes the code to identify the defects in the software application. What is the difference between verification and validation? Verification answers the question, are we building the product right? Which shows verification is a process-oriented approach, whereas validation answers the question, are we building the right product? Which emphasizes on the product. So validation is a product-oriented approach. Then verification is a static process of analyzing the documents and not the actual end product, whereas validation involves dynamic testing of a software product by running it. Since verification is done early in the testing process, errors found during verification require lesser cost to get fixed as compared to validation. So friends, next question. What is the difference between defect, error, fault, failure? This is a question which every tester should know, as we need to deal with these terms every day. How do we define a defect or a bug? When the application is not working as per the requirement is known as defect. It is specified as variation from the actual and expected result of the software. Then comes error. If someone makes an error or mistake in using the software, this may lead directly to a problem. What is a fault? An incorrect step, process or data definition in a computer program which causes the program to perform in an unintended or unanticipated manner. A fault is introduced into the software as the result of an error. Lastly, failure. An event in which a component or system does not perform a required function within specified limits is known as failure. Friends, next very important question is, what is software testing lifecycle, which we also call STLC? STLC has 5 phases as shown on the screen. We also need to consider that some authors also elaborate the STLC phase with additional phases as shown in the picture, however we would stick to the ISTQB standard definition. First phase is planning and control. Second phase is analysis and design. Third phase is implementation and execution. Fourth phase is evaluating exit criteria and reporting. And the fifth and last phase is test closure activities. During test planning, we make sure we understand the goals and objectives of the stakeholders, risks, issues and test approach. Then, second phase, test analysis and design, is the activity where general testing objectives are transformed into tangible test conditions and test designs. Third phase is test implementation and execution. We take the test conditions and make them into test cases and set up the test environment. Fourth phase is evaluating exit criteria and reporting, which is the activity where test execution is assessed against the defined objectives. In fifth phase, which is during test closure activities, we collect data from completed test activities including facts and numbers. Next question which we deal with every day again is, explain bug lifecycle or defect lifecycle. A defect lifecycle is a process in which a defect goes through various phases during its entire lifetime. It starts when a defect is found and ends when a defect is closed, after ensuring it's not reproduced. We can also see the defect lifecycle states in the picture. We need to remember, it varies from organization to organization and also from project to project and also depends upon the tools used. Defect lifecycle states are: new, open; assigned, in progress; retest, pending query; failed retest; deferred, rejected; and closed. Again, these are not the only statuses. Nowadays there are a variety of test management tools and hence, variety of statuses. What are some defect reporting attributes? Or we can also be asked what are the critical fields which we should mention while reporting the defect. Here we need to remember, there are plenty of defect management tools in the market which have different defect reporting fields, but more or less, they have the following essential fields or attribute of defect reporting: defect ID, summary, description, build version, steps to reproduce, expected behavior, actual behavior, priority, severity, reported by, reported on, assigned to, status, environment. Next question is, what is a test plan? Explain the elements of a test plan. Since test plan is a very important testing artifact, so this is a question which is definitely asked in the interviews. A test plan is a formal document derived from requirement documents, describing in detail the scope of testing and the different activities performed in testing. First, writing a test plan guides our thinking. We find that if we can explain something in words, we understand it. If not, there's a good chance we don't. Writing a test plan forces us to confront the challenges that await us and focus our thinking on important topics. Though test plan sections are customized according to the organization requirements, IEEE 829 test plan contents are as follows: Test plan identifier, introduction, test items, features to be tested, features not to be tested, approach, item pass, fail criteria, suspension and resumption criteria, test deliverables, testing tasks, environmental needs, roles and responsibilities, schedule, risks and contingencies, approvals and staffing and training needs. What is the test strategy? Tell me the difference between a test plan and a test strategy. A test plan describes in detail the scope of testing and the different activities performed in testing, whereas a test strategy is a high-level document containing some guidelines about the way testing will be carried out. A test plan is specific to a particular project, whereas a test strategy is usually for a complete organization. Test plan describes the whole testing activities in detail. The techniques used, schedule, resources, whereas strategy describes the high-level test design techniques to be used, environment specifications, etc. Also, test plan is all about the details and specifics, whereas test strategy is more about general approaches and methodologies. So next question, what is a test scenario? A test scenario is a statement describing the functionality of the application to be tested. It is used for end-to-end testing of a feature and is generally derived from the use cases. A test scenario document can have the following fields shown on the screen. First is a module, the module or the component of the application. Secondly, requirement ID. This field is optional and can be linked to the SRS. Thirdly, test scenario ID. This field is the identifier of the test scenarios. Last, description. The description field describes the purpose of the test scenario. Next question is something you might have definitely used in testing. What is a test case? A test case is a set of conditions for evaluating a particular feature of a software product to determine its compliance with the business requirements. A test case has prerequisites, input values, and expected results in a documented form that cover the different test scenarios. Now let's take a look on the main test case attributes. Though we need to remember, different test management tools have different attributes. Test case ID, test summary, description, prerequisite, test steps, test data, expected result, actual result, test result, and lastly, executed by. Next question: what is the difference between test scenarios, test cases, and test script? We have learned in the previous question, a test scenario is basically a documentation of a use case. Test scenarios are created to ensure that every single functionality offered by a website or app is working as expected. Whereas test case refers to the document that contains the steps that is executed to test the software product. Now about test script. Test script refers to a set of instructions or short program which tests some portion of the functionality of a software product. It is also known as an automated test script because it tests an application automatically. What are the test techniques? Explain the main techniques? Friends, if you have watched our previous software testing tutorial, this question has been explained there as well. Let's also discuss the testing techniques. There are two testing techniques, static and dynamic. Static testing techniques do not execute the code and are generally used before any tests are executed on the software. Whereas dynamic testing is a software testing process that is performed in an environment where the code is actually executed, in runtime environment. You can see in the classification chart, static testing has two different parts. One part has all the reviews whereas other part has static analysis, data flow and control flow. Reviews are also have three different types: informal, informal and semi-formal reviews. Then dynamic testing has three types: black box, white box and experience-based. White box testing has statement, decision, condition and multiple conditions. Black box or specification-based testing has equivalence partitioning, boundary value analysis, decision tables, state transition and use case testing. We also have experience-based testing which contains error guessing and exploratory testing. As the name suggests, in these testings, experience, knowledge especially domain knowledge matters a lot. Next interview question is, what is the difference between static and dynamic testing? In static testing, software application is tested without code execution. Whereas under dynamic testing, a code is executed. Static testing does the verification process, whereas dynamic testing does the validation process. Static testing prevents the defects, whereas dynamic testing finds and fixes the defects. Static testing is performed in the early stage of the software development, therefore cost of finding defects and fixing is less in static testing, whereas dynamic testing is performed at the later stage, so cost of finding and fixing defects is high. Next question is a common question in interviews: what are the different type of reviews? Let's first talk about inspection, which is the most formal review type. The document under inspection is prepared and checked thoroughly by the reviewers before the meeting. Defects found are logged and any discussion is postponed until the discussion phase. This makes the inspection meeting a very efficient meeting. Whereas technical review focuses on achieving consensus about the technical content of a document. Compared to inspections, technical reviews are less formal and there is little or no focus on defect identification. Walkthrough also called peer review, and they are informal reviews. It's conducted by the author of the document under review. The author takes the participants through the document to achieve a common understanding and to gather feedback. Another interview question in reviews: what are the different roles and responsibilities in a review? Let's start with the moderator. The moderator schedules the meeting, disseminates documents before the meeting, coaches other team members, leads possible discussions and stores the data that is collected. The author. As the writer of the document under review, the author's goal is to learn as much as possible with regard to improve the quality of the document. Then comes the scribe. During the logging meeting, the scribe or recorder has to record each defect mentioned and any suggestions for process improvement. The reviewers. The task of the reviewers is to check any material for defects, mostly prior to the meeting. Finally, the manager. The manager decides on the execution of reviews, allocates time in project schedules and determines whether review process objectives have been met. Another question on reviews. You can see here, reviews is also an important section. What are the phases of a formal review? First phase is planning. The review process for a particular review begins with a request for review by the author to the moderator. Kickoff. An optional step. The goal of this meeting is to get everybody on the same wavelength regarding the document under review and to commit to the time. Preparation. The participants work individually on the document under review using the related documents, procedures, rules and checklists provided. Review meeting. The meeting typically consists of the following elements: logging, discussion and decision phase. Rework. Based on the defects detected, the author will improve the document under review step by step. Follow-up. The moderator is responsible for ensuring that satisfactory actions have been taken on all defects, process improvement suggestions and change requests. Next question. Perhaps this question is supposed to be asked in every question, so always get ready for this one. What is the difference between equivalence partitioning and boundary value analysis? Equivalence partitioning, EP, is a good all-round specification-based black box technique. The idea behind the technique is to divide a set of test conditions into groups or sets that can be considered the same, hence, equivalence partitioning. The equivalence partitioning technique then requires that we need test only one condition from each partition. Whereas boundary value analysis, BVA, is based on testing at the boundaries between partitions. The basic idea in boundary value testing is to select input variable as follows: minimum, just above the minimum; a nominal value, just below the maximum; and maximum. You can refer to our previous tutorial of software testing to watch an example of both the important techniques. Link is given in the description box. What is the difference between regression and retesting? This question is an easy one but asked many times and sometimes answers are not satisfactory. So first, regression testing is to ensure that changes have not affected unchanged part, whereas retesting is done to make sure that the test's cases which failed in last execution are passed after the defects are fixed. Regression testing is not carried out for specific defect fixes, whereas retesting is carried out for the defect fixes only. Automation is the key for regression testing, whereas test cases for retesting cannot be automated due to uncertainty. What is the difference between smoke and sanity testing? This question creates a confusion in many testers, so first let's understand what's smoke testing. Smoke testing is done generally on the initial build to make sure if the build is testable or not. Smoke testing is performed by both developers and testers. Smoke testing exercises the entire application from end to end. Build may be either stable or unstable because it's initial build. Whereas sanity test is done during the release phase to check for the main functionalities of the application are fine on a high level. Sanity testing is performed by testers alone. Sanity testing exercises only the particular component of the entire application. And sanity testing, build is relatively stable. Next is a frequently asked question. What is risk-based testing? Risk-based testing answers the question, what features do we test first? Risk-based testing is basically a testing done for the project based on risks. Risk-based testing uses risk to prioritize and emphasize the appropriate tests during test execution. Since there might not be sufficient time to test all functionality, risk-based testing involves testing the functionality which has the highest impact and probability of failure. Next question is, what do you understand by defect density? Defect density is the number of defects confirmed in a module during a specific period of development divided by the size of the module. It helps to decide if a piece of software is ready to be released. As per ISTQB, defect density is the number of defects per unit size of a work product. Defect density is counted per 1,000 lines of code, also known as clock. Next question is a basic, mostly asked and an important question which every tester must know. What is the difference between defect priority and severity? So, severity is the degree of impact that a defect has on the system. The defect severity can be categorized as critical, major and minor, whereas priority is the level of business importance assigned to an item, e.g., defect priority categories: high, medium and low. This is an important though tricky question, and sometimes, testers are not able to recall the exact example of this question. Give an example of low priority low severity, low priority high severity, high priority low severity, high priority high severity defects. So first, low priority, low severity. Any cosmetic or spelling issues which is within a paragraph or in the report. Low priority, high severity. Web page not found when user clicks on a link, users does not visit that page often. High priority, low severity. If the company name is misspelled in the home page of the website or spelling mistakes in heading or title of an application or website. High priority, high severity. An error which occurs on the basic functionality of the application and will not allow the user to use the system. Example: user is not able to log in to the application. Next question: what is the end-to-end testing? End-to-end testing is a technique that tests the entire software product from beginning to end to ensure the application flow behaves as expected. Also, end-to-end testing is a testing strategy to execute tests that cover every possible flow of an application from its start to finish. The main purpose of end-to-end (E2E) testing is to test from the end user's experience by simulating the real user scenario and validating the system under test and its components for integration and data integrity. The objective of performing end-to-end tests is to discover software dependencies and to assert that the correct input is getting passed between various software modules and subsystems. What is the difference between alpha and beta testing? So first, alpha testing. Alpha testing involves both the white box and black box testing, performed by testers who are usually internal employees of the organization. Alpha testing is performed at developer's site. Reliability and security testing are not checked in alpha testing. Alpha testing requires a testing environment or a lab. Now beta testing. Beta testing commonly uses black box testing. Beta testing is performed by clients who are not part of the organization. Beta testing is performed at end user of the product. Reliability, security and robustness are checked during beta testing. Beta testing doesn't require a testing environment or lab. What is the difference between ad hoc and exploratory testing? That's an interesting question, as many people think these two testings are same, while they are similar, not the same. Ad hoc testing begins with learning application first and then work with actual testing process. Documentation is not a basic need. Ad hoc is about the perfection of the testing. Ad hoc testing is not important to execute by an expert software testing engineer. It needs some preparation to start and carry on. It's an informal method of testing. Whereas exploratory testing begins with the exploring the application while learning. Documentation is mandatory. It's more about the learning of the application. This always needed to be done by a business subject matter expert. Doesn't need much time to start. And lastly, it's a formal testing. What do you mean by defect triage? Defect triage is a process in which each defect should be prioritized, based on its severity, risk, and its frequency. In the defect triage process, Defect review is the first step towards the start of the meeting. All the bugs present are counted and identified. Defect assessment is the next step in the meeting. All the bugs are reviewed and categorized. Defect assignment is the last step of defect triage. In this, the bugs categorized are divided among the concerned people or department. The respective departments take the final responsibility to fix the bugs. Next question is, what is the Requirement Traceability Matrix, RTM? RTM is used to make sure that each requirement is covered in the testing process and related test cases have been developed. Business requirements document lists all the use cases or requirements of a system. These requirements are matched with test cases written by the testing team. Each requirement, sub-requirement is matched with the test case written for the related requirement. Requirements and test cases may have one-to-many, many-to-one or many-to-many relationships. So what are the three types of traceability matrix? First, we have forward traceability. In the forward traceability matrix, requirements are mapped to the test cases. It helps in making sure that each requirement is included in the testing process. Proper and thorough tracing of requirements is achieved through this type of matrix. Second, backward traceability. Backward traceability is also known as reverse traceability. In this type of matrix, test cases are mapped to requirements as opposed to forward traceability where requirements are mapped to test cases. Third, bidirectional traceability. Bidirectional traceability matrix covers both forward and backward traceability. It makes sure that each requirement has a proper test case written and each test case can be traced back to the correct requirement. Next critical and a fundamental question is, what are the test levels? There are 4 test levels. 1. Unit or component testing. The most basic type of testing is unit, or component, testing. Unit testing aims to verify each part of the software by isolating it and then perform tests to demonstrate that each individual component is correct. This type of testing is performed at the earliest stages of the development process. 2. Integration testing. Integration testing aims to test different parts of the system in combination in order to assess if they work correctly together. 3. System testing. The next level of testing is system testing. As the name implies, all the components of the software are tested as a whole in order to ensure that the overall product meets the requirements specified. 4. Acceptance testing. Finally, acceptance testing is the level in the software testing process where a product is given the green light or not. The aim of this type of testing is to evaluate whether the system complies with the end-user requirements and if it is ready for deployment. Next question is an important one for learning: what is test estimation? How do you estimate the testing efforts? Software testing estimation is a management activity to calculate and approximate time, resources and expenses needed to complete test execution in a specified environment. Estimating testing efforts requires experience on multiple. There are a number of test estimation techniques, but in summary, while estimating a testing project, we need to consider following: team skills, domain knowledge, complexity of the application, historical data, bug cycles for the project, resources availability, productivity variations, system environment and downtime. Next question is, what does a typical test status report contain? Test status reporting is a formalized reporting on the status of the project from a testing point of view. Some of the main elements of a test status report should be: project info, test objective, highlights, test execution summary, the number of the executed test cases, the number of the past test cases, the number of the failed test cases, past test cases percentage, failed test cases percentage, defects, risks and issues, and any comments. Next question, what do you understand by entry and exit criteria? Entry criteria can be defined as specific conditions which are required to start a particular phase of STLC should be present before entering any of the STLC phase. Entry criteria is a set of conditions that permits a task to perform, or in absence of any of these conditions, the task cannot be performed. Whereas exit criteria can be defined as actions that must be completed before concluding the current phase and moving on to the next phase. Exit criteria is a set of expectations. This should be met before concluding the STLC phase. Next question is, what are some of the different testing types? There can be a number of testing, but let's focus on what are the standard testing types. Functional and non-functional testing. Structural testing. Regression testing. Confirmation testing. Maintenance testing. API testing. Database testing. Internationalization testing. Localization testing. And recovery testing. What is configuration management? Configuration management is a change control process. It helps in managing and controlling the versions of software and hardware configuration, used primarily when software requirements change. In configuration management, we making sure that these items are managed carefully in entire project and product life cycle. These items include source code, test scripts, third-party software, hardware, data, and both development and test documentation. First is configuration items. Configuration items can be software requirements, design, code, test cases, test scripts, test plan, project plan. Baseline. A baseline is a formally accepted version of a software configuration item. Change control is board including numbers of people which take important decisions regarding the configuration management of projects. Configuration status accounting tracks each release during the configuration management process. This stage involves tracking what each version has and the changes that lead to this version. Then lastly, software configuration audits verify that all the software product satisfies the baseline needs. It ensures that what is built is what is delivered. What do you understand by test data? Test data is the data used for testing purposes. ISTQB definition. Data created or selected to satisfy the execution preconditions and inputs to execute one or more test cases. Test data is divided into two types. Valid test data. Positive data used for the system when generating expected results. This is a combination of all possible inputs to make sure the application is working as per the requirements. Invalid test data is the negative data used to test unexpected or negative conditions and exceptions, like null values, out-of-range values, special characters that are not allowed, and invalid data format. Next question is, can you list out the test deliverables? Testers must know the main deliverables. Main deliverables for testing are test plan, test strategy, test estimation, test scenarios, test cases or test scripts, test data, requirement traceability matrix, defect report, daily test execution report, weekly status report, graphs and metrics, test summary report, test incident report, and finally test closure report. Next interview question we have: what are the essential components of a defect report? Well, here we need to remember, there are plenty of defect management tools in the market which have different defect reporting fields, but more or less, they have the following essential fields or attribute of defect reporting: defect ID, summary, description, build version, steps to reproduce, expected behavior, actual behavior, priority, severity, reported by, reported on, assigned to, status, environment, assigned to, status, environment. What is cross-browser testing? Cross-browser testing is a type of non-functional test which helps us ensure that our website or web application works as expected in various web browsers. We could do cross-browser testing on different browsers, both manual and automated way. Next testing interview question: what is a test metric? Test metric is a quantitative analysis that helps in monitoring the progress of a software project. Every project has its own timeline, so to ensure the delivery of the project on time requires setting deliverables at different intervals, and this aspect of measuring the progress is provided by test metrics. One very interesting and very common interview question is, when should you stop the testing process? Answer is sometimes tricky, especially for the freshers. The testing activity ends after the team completes the following milestones. Test case execution. The successful completion of a full test cycle after the final bug fix marks the end of the testing phase. Testing deadline. The end date of the validation stage also declares the closure of the validation if no critical or high-priority defects remain in the system. Code coverage. It is the amount of code covered via automated tests. If the team achieves the desired level of code coverage, CC ratio, then they can choose to end the validation. Next question is it possible to achieve 100% coverage of testing? How would you ensure it? Answer is no, it's not possible to perform 100% testing of any product. However, we need to keep monitoring and take action. The following: percentage of test cases passed, the no of bugs found, test budget depleted, deadlines breached. The entire functionality gets covered in test cases. All critical and high bugs are closed. Next testing interview question is, what is meant by the top-down and bottom-up approach? Both are the part of integration testing. In top-down approach, testing goes from top to bottom. It first validates the high-level modules and then goes for low-level modules. Finally, it tests the integrated modules to ensure the system is working as expected. Whereas bottom-up approach is a reverse of the top-down method. In this, testing occurs from bottom to up. It first tests the lowest level modules and then goes for high-level modules. Finally, it verifies the integrated modules to ensure the system is working as expected. Then next question is, what is the difference between a test driver and test stub? The test driver is a piece of code that calls a software component under test. It is useful in testing that follows the bottom-up approach. Whereas test stub is a dummy program that integrates with an application to complete its functionality. These are relevant for testing that uses the top-down approach. Another important and a basic question for testing interviews is, what is the difference between system integration testing, also called SIT, and user acceptance testing, that is UAT? SIT testing method emphasis on the interfacing between the modules, whereas UAT focuses on the requirements with the user point of view. SIT testing is performed by developers and testers, whereas UAT is performed by customers and end users. SIT reveals or focuses problems regarding data flow, control flow, etc., whereas UAT involves the functionality issues or non-working features according to the user requirement. Next question, may be a little bit advanced or intermediate level question. How to perform risk analysis during software testing? Well, first we need to understand the risk analysis. Analyzing risks is the process of identifying the hidden issues that may derail the successful delivery of the application. The following are some of the example risks: new hardware, new technology, new automation tool, schedule or the sequence of code delivery, and availability of test resources in the project. We prioritize risks into 3 categories, which are as follows: high, medium and low. Next interview question, what are the tasks performed in the test environment setup? The test team performs the following tasks during the environment setup: assess the need for new software and hardware requirements, prepare the test infrastructure, and also test team executes smoke tests and confirms the readiness of the test infra. Next good question is, what is the defect detection percentage? Defect detection percentage, e.g., DDP is a type of testing metric. It indicates the effectiveness of a testing process by measuring the ratio of defects discovered before the release and reported after release by customers. For example, if the testing team logged 80 defects during the testing cycle, and the users reported 20 more after the release, the DDP would come as 80% through the calculation as shown on the screen. Another good one for testing interviews: what does the defect removal efficiency mean? Defect Removal Efficiency, or DRP, is a type of testing metric. It is an indicator of the efficiency of the development team to fix issues before the release. It gets measured as the ratio of defects fixed to total the number of issues discovered. For example, if 100 defects discovered during the test cycle, while 75 of them got fixed by the development team at the time of measurement, the DRE would come to 75% after the calculation as shown. This might be a specific or difficult one. What is cyclomatic complexity in software testing? Well, the cyclomatic complexity represents a test metric known as the program complexity. It sees a program as a graph using the control flow representation. The graph includes the following attributes: nodes. A node indicates the processing tasks. Edges. An edge shows the control flow between the nodes. Time for the bonus questions. What is known as data-driven testing? Data-driven testing is the methodology where a series of test scripts containing test cases are executed repeatedly using data sources like Excel spreadsheet, XML file, CSV file, SQL database for input values, and the actual output is compared to the expected one in the verification process. Some advantages of data-driven testing are: reusability, repeatability, test data separation from test logic. The number of test cases is reduced. Bonus question 2 is: what are the best practices for writing test cases? Write test cases with end users' perspective. Write test steps in a simple way that anyone can follow them easily. Make the test cases reusable. Set the priority. Provide a test case description, test data, expected result, precondition, postcondition. Write invalid test cases along with valid test cases. Follow proper naming conventions. Review the test cases regularly and update them if necessary. So friends, hope these interview questions would help you to prepare for your testing interview in a proper and better way and has added useful pointers in your testing understanding. Please write in the comment if you want something similar or different content. And please, don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Thanks for watching and loving the videos. See you in the next one.